You know, chipping doesn't have to be that hard. In these next 3 videos, I'm going to share with you some of the real secrets to making chipping easy. People have told me time and time again this has helped them tremendously on their short game, and I can't wait to share it with you. Let's go and get started. What a pain in the butt, these thick, rough, greenside shots where you're fairly close to the flag. You know, if I swing hard enough to guarantee that I'm going to get it out of this rough, I'm going to fly way past the pin. If I swing really easy to just make sure that I hit it the right distance, a lot of times the rough's going to grab my club, it's going to completely stop it, and I'm just going to flub it. It's going to go just a couple feet here. Both options are extremely frustrating and add 1 or 2 strokes to your scorecard in a heartbeat. It's a great way to double bogey a hole. So let me set this down really, really thick in this rough. So I'm going to take this and really bury it down in this Bermuda. Any of you that play in Florida know that this is tougher to hit out of than even, you know, fescue that's 4 or 5 inches tall, because it just completely swallows up the club. So it's really buried in there. There's a couple things I want you to follow. Number 1, when we have all this rough to hit through, the last thing I want to do is catch a bunch of that starting way back here and hit all this grass. That's going to kill the speed of my club, and that's going to be the one that you flub and hit 3 or 4 feet. So I want to make sure I put it back in my stance. That way I'm chopping down a little bit more. I'm really kind of thumping the ground when I hit this shot. I want to see a little bit of a divot almost there, even on this short shot. So I'm coming down, hitting right behind the golf ball. That's going to allow you to be more consistent, not hit as much of that rough behind it. It also, when you hit the rough, it wants to take that hosel of the club and slam the face shut. It's going to help to keep it a little slow, or a little bit more square. Number 2, I'm going to open the face a little bit. I have my 60-degree wedge here. I'm going to open it probably 20 degrees. That way, I can go ahead and thump this ball fairly hard. If I hit it a little too hard, it's going to go up in the air and still stop fairly close to the hole. If I hit it a little too soft, it's still going to get up in the air and it's going to get on the green. So if you're a little hard or a little soft, it has a lot more margin for error when you have the face slightly open. Number 3, I'm going to have my weight left. And then number 4, I'm going to go ahead and be pretty aggressive with this. It's not a flop shot, but it is fairly aggressive swing. And then number 5, I'm going to go ahead and hinge my wrist. Again, I don't want this to be a chipping type motion. When I do that, you'll notice that because this grass is longer, I'm starting to make contact with the turf way back here. It's going to eat it up. So ball back in the stance, weight a little bit left, don't have to get crazy left here. Face a little bit open, swing hard, and hinge the wrist. If you do those 4 things, this shot gets pretty easy. Now there's only a couple things you need to do to be a phenomenal chipper, to really just to make this easy. Number 1, you need to keep your body and your arms working together. If I do that correctly, you can see that this green band stays under my arm. Now if my arms get separated from my body, you can see that flies out. I'm going to show you this drill here in a second. Now number 2, we have to make sure that we don't get stuck underneath. If my club starts to tip underneath, the right side of my body starts to fall down, I'm going to get those chunks, or I'm going to get those drop kicks that just kind of fly across the green. So once I show you this method, it's going to be really easy. You're going to feel super confident, and you're going to feel like any chip or pitch that you have, you're really just going to be able to knock it close and make clean, solid contact. All right, so that almost never happens. I promise that was on the first take. Usually it doesn't work out that good, but let me show you a couple things here with this rubber band. So this is a great drill. Chris Hunsucker, one of our Top Speed Golf certified instructors, showed me this. I didn't have one of these bands, and I put it off for almost a year. I never tried this drill out because I never ordered one of these. And don't do what I did. If you don't already have one of these little TheraBands, use any kind of band that you have, or if you don't have one, just order one, because this is the best chipping drill. It is phenomenal at how good it helps you to not only stay connected, but also to keep that club from dropping underneath. Now, the real goal with this is to make sure that you make clean contact with the ground. That's what chipping really is. Anything else we do is just to come down, make contact with the ground at the right spot, and be very consistent with that. So what I've done is I've wrapped this around the club face. I'm gonna stick the other end under my armpit. So what I'll do is I'll grab the club with my left hand, I'll stick it with my right hand under my armpit. I get that question all the time from people I've showed this drill to. And what I'm working on here is I'm making sure my body keeps on rotating and turns into my left arm. So you can imagine here, the upper part of my left arm, this bone here, the bicep of my arm, my humerus bone here is really attached across my body. It's cinched in against my left pec, and that cinched in feeling there is going to pinch this rubber band. Now, if I rotate my body and I keep my knees moving, so notice how my legs and my knees are going to move through this shot, I can turn into this left arm and I'm very connected. You hear all great chippers and pitchers talk about how connected they are. This is what they mean. This is the part that's connected. And that allows them to keep that face very, very square and very consistent so that you can hit the ground in the same spot over and over again. You don't have to worry about chunking and thinning if you're doing this. So grab this rubber band, stick it underneath your arm. If you don't have a rubber band, you can use a glove, but I don't like that nearly as much because it doesn't give you that feedback of the connection. You can hit some easy chips, and I'll just go ahead and knock one 10 feet here or so, just showing you how you can actually hit them with a rubber band. It's not the best because it's going to kind of mess up the contact there, but you get the idea. The main thing is that I want to keep a decent amount of tension here. That way, if my body stops, if my legs stop moving, if my hips stop moving, and I just arm it, it flies out. That's what I see daggone near every player. I would say pretty much 100% of players that are struggling to get that consistent contact are doing that motion. Let me give you a couple keys that make you want to do this motion. So sometimes players will put the ball too far back in their stance, they'll have too much forward shaft lean, and that'll get them into this kind of very descending blow. Now when that happens, the body stops, it stands up. A lot of times you'll lose your posture, and then you're going to throw the hands and arms to keep from burying this club in the ground. Now if you did that, you'll see how you get this chicken wing action, and that chicken wing is actually good for that movement, because if I didn't do the chicken wing, I would go ahead and stay connected here, I would chop down into it, and I just cold chunk it. Now when you use that rubber band, you're automatically going to feel where you need to play the ball position, how you need to come into contact to keep that rubber band and brush the turf and come to that finish. So there's really no way to cheat it. You put that rubber band under your arm, it gets your ball position better, it gets your angle of attack better, it keeps your connection, it keeps you brushing the ground in the same spot. I mean, it's really just a daggone good drill. If you're curious, I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple other pieces with that I'd recommend, just to save you a little bit of time. I like to think of my ball position in relationship to my left foot. So if my stance is very narrow like this, I'm going to open my stance slightly. I like to have my toes slightly ahead. That helps you to pivot in front and again keep that connection here. And I want to play the ball position kind of off my left heel. Now if I had a little wider stance, again that ball position would still be somewhere kind of toward my left heel. If I have a narrow stance, it's toward my left heel. Some people will do it in relationship to their right foot, and I don't think that's right, because if your stance is narrow, yes, this ball position is on my right foot. But if I get my stance a little wider and I play it on my right foot, now I'm chopping down into it. And that's because our weight is left. Since our weight is left, our weight is over our left foot, we should play our ball position in relationship to our left foot. So that's piece number one. Stick that rubber band, stick whatever kind of band you have under your armpit, make some swings. I could go into a ton of detail about every little tiny thing that's happening there, but I'll be honest with you. You wrap that rubber band around, you practice for a couple days like that for just 15, 20 shots, you're gonna get the feeling right away of what the best chippers in the world are feeling and how they're moving the body, how they're staying connected. So I'm gonna wrap this rubber band around the club head again, and now we're gonna talk about getting stuck under. This is another really big one that a lot of players struggle with. This is the second piece to this chipping method that's gonna make it really easy to hit it solid. So when I get stuck under, what's happening there is when I take my backswing, my club goes a little too much to the inside. In my downswing, my right side of my body drops. And you can see how this gets the club closer to the ground, and it gets it wanting to ground out back here. Now that's an exaggeration, but if I do too much of that, club to the inside, ground out, boom, that's a chunk. Now if I'm lucky enough to miss the ground and not chunk it, now the club's working back up into the ball and you thin it across the green. So really the chunk shot and the thin shot are the same thing. Everything's falling right, falling underneath. This rubber band is also awesome for that, because what it does is when I make my backswing, because there's a little bit of tension here, I'm typically going to keep this club head outside of my hands and arms. So as I make this backswing when I'm looking from down the line, you're going to see how this club head is not in here, it's staying a little bit out. And then from there, all I need to do is keep my body left and rotate through to the finish. Now when I get to the finish, I want to make sure my chest is over my hips and everything is rotated on through. What I don't want to do is go here, fall this way, and not finish, so fall to the right. A great little tip for that is when you set up, go ahead and set up with your spine a little bit farther forward, or almost the opposite of what you would do in your full swing. Now we know from the Top Speed Golf system that we have to have a little spine tilt away in the full swing. In the short game, it's actually the opposite of that. I want to have my spine basically straight up and down so that I can keep that low point very consistent. Now the most common question I get there is, why do I have to have it different for the full swing and the short game? Well, in the short game, it's all about consistency and hitting one point. You don't have to create any power. We would do it the same way in the full swing if we never had to hit it over 150 yards. This is the most consistent way of doing it. But unfortunately, golf requires some power. You have to get behind the golf ball to really create a lot of power. When we're close to the green, we don't need power. We just need to be consistent. So I'm going to set up with my upper body a little bit more to the left. I'm going to visualize this rubber band staying connected, club heads outside, and then I'm just going to rotate on through. Now if I do that, things just get super, super easy here. Let's go ahead and try another one out. There we go, 2 in a row, both within 1.5 feet of the hole. Not going to do much better than that. All right, pretty good one there. Let's see if that will spin. There we go, spun it back a little bit. That's one of the most fun shots in golf. You hit that shot that comes in there nice and low, checks up, you see it spin back on the green. How in the heck did the pros make it look so easy, and how can we do the same thing ourselves? I want to give you the real secrets to creating tons of backspin in this video. Now, first let's talk about the myth of shaft lean, or the myth of lack of shaft lean. A lot of times when people are saying, I want to hit a spin shot, there's 2 different ones that they're talking about. Now this one here is a 50-yard low launching spin shot. Now when I hit this one, a lot of people will say, well, I want to create a lot of loft, that way it gets backspin on it. So I'm going to go ahead and release the club shaft. I want the club shaft to be straight up and down. That is a complete myth. When you're 40, 50, 60, anything outside of 40 yards, you're creating quite a bit of shaft lean. Your hands are in front on these shots. And what we found through tons of people have had lots of research with the pro players using machines like this $18,000 GC quad that I have here, and it tells me exactly how much loft I have on it. What I found is that you want to have about mid-40s to slightly higher 40s loft when you're hitting these shots. Now this is a 60-degree wedge, so if you take this little trailer hitch marker here, and I put that on that club, that would be the direction my face is pointing when the shaft is straight up and down. Mid-40s means I'm going to take 15 degrees off of that. I'm going to have this shaft leaning forward, de-lofting that club quite a bit when I'm doing this. That allows me to get more consistent contact. You see, if you get too much loft on it, the ball is going to slide up the face. Imagine like a flop shot. So if I was going to hit a flop shot here with this face just straight up and down toward the sky, that ball would launch high, but it wouldn't have much spin. It's almost like a knuckleball. That's because the club is just sliding right underneath the ball, and it goes up in the air, but it doesn't have much backspin on it. If I want to get the backspin, I have to have my hands leaning in front a little bit. Now the second thing with the hands leaning in front is it gives you a lot more consistency. So here, I've got my 60-degree wedge. I'm going to have the hands quite in front, maybe 15 degrees, and we'll see how much spin we can get on it. Now anything over 7,000 RPMs on a 50-yard shot is pretty daggone good. So we'll see if we can get over that 7,000 RPMs. That one's going to be pretty good. Caught that one, nipped it pretty nice, just past the hole, and we saw that one checked up right away. Now 47 degrees aloft, that means I had 13 degrees of shaft lean right where we wanted to be. Maybe just a touch too thin on the face because I got 6,700 RPMs of backspin. So not bad. We can see that it checked up on the green, but we might be able to do a little bit better than that. Now the next thing that we want to do is we don't want to feel like we're slow through contact. This is an aggressive shot. I have to get the speed coming through the shot to get the spin on there. That's one of the reasons that I'm using this 60-degree wedge. If I use a 60, like a lot of the pros are doing, if I really accelerate, I'm going to have a lot of shaft lean naturally, and I'm going to get about the perfect amount of loft on there. Now, if I use a 56-degree wedge or a pitching wedge even, I would start off with less loft, which would get me about the right amount of loft. But then if I went ahead and accelerated and got really aggressive and got my hands in front so I could be consistent, I would have too little loft in, sorry. So we start out with a 60. We're nice and aggressive through the shot. The second thing I want to think about, I like to play this shot with a slightly open face until I get out around 60, 70 yards. So that face is just going to be turned open just a few degrees to help engage the bounce there. And that just helps me to keep from digging on this. Gives me a little more room for error. Now I'm going to set my feet a little bit forward. I want to have it, this would be square. I'm going to go ahead and put my feet slightly angled forward like this, especially my front foot. That really helps me to rotate through the shot better and to get a lot more action on it, get a lot of zip on it. You'll see a lot of pros set up like this on those 40, 50 yard shots. Again, as I go longer, I may set up a little bit more square. Let's try this one out. That one may be a touch short, but overall a pretty good shot. We see that one start to spin back a little bit. Again, 47 degrees loft, got the good number there. My backspin was 8,000 on that one, so I caught it just a hair better. That's about as high as I'm going to get on one of these shots. Now, there's a couple more myths on creating spin. You don't really create backspin by having that shot go high. When I see this shot 40, 50, 60 yards, I want that thing to launch really low. In fact, I'd like my launch angle to be under 30 degrees. That one was 27.6 degrees. That looks to your eye, you don't have to do all these numbers and know that, but that looks to most people's eye to be really low. The reason it's coming out low is because there's a lot of friction. So when I'm catching this ball, if I want to have a lot of spin, one of the reasons I have that shaft lean forward too is that I want to catch this ball kind of low on the face. If I have the handle leaning straight up and down, that's actually going to pull this leading edge up off the turf. So when I have the shaft leaning back, now my leading edge is pulled up off the ground, and it's really easy to thin shots if you start doing that. As I lean the handle forward, now it starts to pull that leading edge closer to the turf, and I can hit it lower on the golf ball. So the key with spin is I can't have any debris, any water, any turf, anything get between my perfectly clean enough to eat off of it face of my wedge and a perfectly dry, clean golf ball. It has, both surfaces have to be really dry and clean to get that zip on there. If I hit it slightly lower on the face, that's going to help it to launch a little lower. It's also going to help to make sure nothing gets between the golf ball and the face. So I like to think just slightly low on the face, that's the best spot to hit it, maybe a millimeter lower than normal. If you're looking down and you see a little spot on your wedge where there's grass stuck to it, it's not going to spin. The stuff that's inside the grass, all that oily, grease, water, whatever's inside a blade of grass causes it to slip up the face rather than really grab there. So again, this one I want to visualize it launching pretty low. That comes from me getting good friction on a nice clean strike low on the face. It also comes from me leaning that shaft forward. Let's go ahead and hit one more here. There we go, maybe a little out to the right. That's pretty good. And that one spun back a little bit too. So on there, that shot, 46 degrees loft, again, perfect, 7,500 RPMs of backspin, again, right where I want to be. Now, let's be honest, that leaves you with a problem. How do I know if I'm hitting it 50 yards, 60 yards, 70 yards? How do I know if I'm getting it to stop right at the correct distance? How do the pros seem to be able to hit it right on the number? Well, I like to use a system that I call a clock system, but there's a specific way you do this. It's not about necessarily where you stop your hands for each distance of shot, but it's also about a specific rhythm and a specific timing that you use. If you don't get that timing right, you're not going to be able to hit it right on your numbers. I've got an awesome video that's going to walk you right through this. I'll play a preview of it here in a second. All you need to do is go ahead and click the card that pops up on the screen. And if you don't see that card, don't worry, just go down to the description below, click the link there, and you'll also get instant access. I'm going to walk you through the timing, the rhythm, and the technique of that clock swing. That way we can hit these spinning shots, but we can get them to land right on the number that we want so we have some nice, really short putts. Let's go and get started.
Well, I used to actually practice a lot in high school. This is one of my favorite things to do. I had a strip mowed down the back of my yard where I took the lawnmower. My parents probably hated this because I mowed it down to like half-inch turf in the back of the yard because we lived on a farm, and I would set buckets or towels along this, and I would try to set them at those distances that I knew. And maybe I knew my 56 degree went right at 65 yards. So I'd set a bucket 65 yards away, and I would go ahead and do my 9 o'clock swing, and I would try to fly it right into the bucket. And I'd get to where I could tell for sure if I was going to be a couple yards short or a couple yards long, just because it gets so ingrained when you get the rhythm and the finish the same every time. We can use different length backswings to control the distance of our wedge shots. So for example, if we imagine that I'm a clock and 6 o'clock is directly down, my wedge would be at 6 o'clock, or my arms would be at 6 o'clock, I can go back to a 7:30 swing and I can have the same finish and hit at a certain distance, or I can go back to 9 or 10:30 and swing through to the same distance, and that's going to control, or the same finish point, and that's going to control the distance that my wedge shots are going to fly in the air. And I've got to keep that rhythm and that tempo very, very consistent. If I vary my tempos, I can hit at all kinds of different distances. So for example, I could have a real quick tempo 7:30 swing and probably hit this 90 yards. I could have a, maybe not really that far, probably 50 or 60 yards. I could have a very slow tempo 7:30 swing and hit half that distance. So I've got to get my distance the same. I've got to get my rhythm the same. That's the real key to it. And the second piece on there